Hello and welcome back to the podcast, That's Showbiz, with your host, Hannah Ranco. I hope you all had a great week this week. I actually had a show this week, so I was busy dancing at the Foundry in Cambridge, Mass. with the Click Boston. I had such a blast. It was a really fun dance theater piece. There was dancing, acting, props. I'm very tired, but I'm also very inspired and ready for the rest of my week. Today, we are back with another episode of Showbiz Basics. This week, we are talking about resumes. Last week, we talked about headshots. This week, we're talking about resumes. They both kind of go hand in hand in the performance space. But today, we are talking about how to have a rock-solid resume. Even if you are a seasoned professional and you know how to write a resume, still give this episode a listen because I have some great tips that you can incorporate into your resume building and your CV building. I also have great tips for teaching students how to write a resume. So if you are an educator, you can get tips on how to help your students slay their resume game. And like I said, last week we talked about headshots. So if you missed that episode, go and give that a listen because I have a lot of great tips and tricks on how to have a good headshot. Without further ado, let's dive into this week's episode, Resumes 101. Just like last week's episode, I will be formatting this episode in a series of questions related to the topic of resumes. So the first question I have is, what is a resume/CV? In today's episode, we will not only be talking about resumes, but also CVs. You might be wondering what a CV is because I didn't know what a CV was until I was in college. CV stands for curriculum vitae, or there's some other pronunciations out there, but I just say vitae. And it is a comprehensive list of all things you've ever done. So this differs from a resume because a resume is typically about one page and it is a snapshot of work that is related to the job you are applying for, whereas a CV is a collection of everything you've ever done related to your career, your accomplishments, your experiences, your awards, all of that. A resume is a formal document that a job applicant creates to itemize their qualifications for a position, whereas a CV, according to Google, is an itemized list of a person's entire education, publications, and awards. CVs are typically used in academic spaces, where resumes can be used for any job. And while I was researching for this topic, I found a little fun fact. In Europe and Canada, resumes and CVs are often synonymous. So if you're applying to a job in Europe or Canada, just be aware that they are the same thing there. Anyways, we are going to dive right into more differences between a resume and CV. I think it is very important that students and artists understand the difference and when to use a CV and when to use a resume. Although oftentimes it's pretty clear when you have to use a CV versus a resume. A CV is longer and more comprehensive, usually around 2 to 3 pages, but the pages increase as your experience and career increases. A resume is shorter and it's usually just 1 page. A CV is used for academic purposes, usually working at a university or applying for a research program. So for example, when I was looking to get hired at Endicott, I submitted my CV. Resumes are used for regular jobs, and this includes performance jobs as an artist. Resume is only relevant experience to the job you're applying for, whereas a CV is all your experiences in your career. I should specify that doesn't mean include when you worked at Dunkin' in your CV. Keep it to career relevant jobs and experiences. A CV is universal and not custom. What I mean by this is you're going to add on to your CV with time, but you're never going to adjust your CV to fit the needs of a job. It's everything you've done. Whereas a resume should be customized depending on the job you are applying for. So in dance, if you are auditioning for a cruise ship, your resume might look very different than if you were auditioning for a contemporary company. And that's because you should adjust your resume to fit the needs of the employer you're trying to work for. The next topic I want to talk about is a regular resume versus a performance resume. In high school, students usually learn the basics of writing a resume in high school, although I will say probably not as much as they need to know. But what I find among undergrads who come into my classes is that when I ask them to write a performance resume, they oftentimes write the most god-awful piece of paper I've ever looked at, with peace and love. And so they are very unsure about how to create a performance resume, which varies slightly from a regular resume, although there are quite a few similarities. But here are some things that a performance resume may include that a regular resume may not. One is a headshot in the corner of a resume, of a performance resume. Oftentimes, performers will take their headshot and make it very small and put it in the corner so that if you're auditioning and, like I said in the last episode, you have your headshot on the other side of your resume, it could be helpful to a casting director to be able to see your face without flipping over the page. It is my understanding that that is the primary reason for having that in the corner. A regular resume with a teaching job or a regular job, you're not going to put a photo in the corner. Another thing you're going to include is information like height, eye color, hair color, union status that you're not going to include most likely in a regular resume. And even in a performance resume, you may not include these things, but they also might ask, depending on the job, for those things. They might ask for measurements, things like that. And then also performance experience. Clearly, you're not going to put, if you're applying for a job in an office, you're not going to talk about how you were a lead in a musical. Probably. But there are still a lot of things that are similar to a regular resume, and that is work experience, education, and skills. And like I said, it is important to note that a performance resume typically only includes skills and work experience that is related to the performing arts. So there is no need to note that you worked at Dunkin' in your performance resume. Okay, the next topic is how to start a resume or CV. And this is a great topic if you're an educator teaching students how to write. So, before you even start your resume, you should make a comprehensive list of every job or achievement you've ever had. And this list should be anything you could ever think of. Even if you think, yeah, there's no way I'm going to include this, write it down. So even if you think it's not resume worthy, still write it down. Write down all your hard and soft skills. Write down everything that comes to mind and make a long list. After you have that list, you're going to write down dates for those experiences and details. So if you were a lead in a musical, what musical? Where was the musical? The date you did it. All of that information, okay? And after that, you're going to categorize each experience or achievement. And this could be categorized by things such as work experience, performance experience, education, awards, honors, skills, etc. So you're going to just pull each thing off your list and put it into a category. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but this will give you an idea of where you're at. After that, you're going to look up a template. A lot of people in my undergrad program, a lot of professors told me that I should not use Google Docs or Pages templates. And I personally don't understand that. I think their thinking is, oh, an employer is going to know that you just looked on Google Docs for a template. And I'm like, yes, and that's my opinion, but whatever. Either way, make it custom to you. You could also look up Google Images and look at other people's resumes, and that's a really great way for inspiration as well. Next up is what to include in a resume. So at the top of your resume, you're going to have your name, and it's going to be bolded or slightly larger text size than the rest of your resume, and that's so that they know your name right off the bat. It doesn't have to be extremely over the top big. I see a lot of resumes that are just way too extra and it's taking up space, but it should stand out. Your name should stand out. And then under your name should be contact info. This could include email, phone, and a website if you have a performance website. I like to then structure my resume into, I start with education. So I'll put Dean College, BFA in dance. In my opinion, I don't think you need to include high school. I just think it's irrelevant. Yeah, you went to high school. And especially if you are a college graduate, obviously you went to high school, so there's no need to include that. The next thing you're going to include is work experience, and you're going to include company names, positions you held, and dates employed. Again, I've heard a lot of people say, oh, you don't need dates in your resume, but I like to include them. It's a personal preference. Underneath each job experience, you're going to write a brief summary of the position and its requirements. This can be literally 1 to 2 sentences. And I want you to write this summary in the perspective of an employer who knows nothing about the job you worked for or the experience you had, because likely they don't. And you can even make it sound more impressive than it is. There's nothing wrong with that. Just don't lie, but you can definitely make it sound more impressive. In a resume, you're also going to want to include specific performance skills. So examples of this could be specific styles of hip hop. If you're a popper, if you're a locker, that's a great thing to put in a skills section. If you're a break dancer, again, very great to put in a skills section. Tumbling, acro, circus tricks, aerial, anything like that. I should note that if you're writing down special skills, be prepared in an audition to showcase those skills. If a casting director sees that you can tumble, they might ask you, okay, do a tumbling pass. And so don't lie. If you don't feel comfortable doing that on the spot, don't put it down. In a resume, you're also going to include training related to the field, and this can go underneath education or along with education. And again, you're going to name the school, dates enrolled, start and end, anticipated end, major, if applicable, anything like that. Finally, just a quick tip on making a performance resume. Make sure you do your research on the jobs you are applying for and adjust your resume accordingly. As I've said previously, it's really important to not include the things that are irrelevant and include the things that will make you stand out in terms of that specific job you're applying for. The next topic is resume considerations. So these are other things to consider when writing your resume. The first is, again, your resume should change depending on the job you're applying for, but this is why writing a list or even writing a CV is helpful. I have my CV, and I oftentimes pull jobs that I've done from my CV to my resume. It's just so convenient to have a comprehensive document of everything you've done. So then you can adjust your resume. It's super easy. You just pick and pull what you want to include. You're going to want to talk in past tense for past jobs and present tense for current jobs. So if you were a teacher, you're going to say taught kids, ages, whatever styles of, name the styles that you taught. But if you're currently teaching at a studio, you're going to say teaching students age 5 to whatever, genres, whatever. With that being said, don't use I or me. So just say performed or teaching or taught. Start it off with that. Don't start it off with I performed. Start it off with performed. Only include relevant teachers and choreographers you've worked with if you think it will help you in a job. Do your research. If you're auditioning for a contemporary company that's worked with a specific choreographer and you've worked with that choreographer, it would be a good idea to put that choreographer's name down. But if you are just trying to list your teacher from 9th grade in who knows where town with peace and love, no one cares. That's not to say that teacher isn't amazing, but in a resume, we're thinking of the perspective of the employer, and that just doesn't seem like relevant information to the job you're applying for. With that being said, it is important to always think about the point of view of someone who does not know the school you're trained at or the jobs you've done. So writing it as if no one knows the things you've done and you have to explain it. And another thing to consider is a resume is always a work in progress. So as you build on your career, your resume should change over time, and there should be jobs that you no longer include because they're older and they're not as impressive. So just know that as you gain experience, your resume is going to change drastically. The next topic is resume no's. Luckily, this list is short because we've already covered a lot of things you want to avoid in a resume. But one thing is to not include dance studio, I'll just say an example. Susie's Tip Tappin' School of Dance. With peace and love, again, it just doesn't sound very professional. Nothing against Susie, but it just doesn't sound professional. So I would just avoid that personally, in my opinion. Competition awards and titles that you got in high school, just don't. Run. Do not put that. Do not put that. Even if your resume might look a little bit blank without those things. No one cares in the professional world if you won Platinum Pro at so-and-so competition. Competitions are businesses, and they don't always indicate the level of experience a dancer has. So it's just not relevant to the job that you're probably applying for, okay? And the other thing is a personal opinion. Weight, I just think if you include measurements and height and all of that, weight is kind of irrelevant. And a lot of jobs don't really need to know weight. So those are the resume no's. The next thing I want to go over is about CVs, and that is what to include in a CV. So like I said, a CV is a comprehensive document. So there's a lot of things you want to include. This includes contact information, just like a resume. However, no performance photo in the corner for its CV. All education and qualifications with the name of institutions and date attended in reverse chronological order. Work experience in reverse chronological order. Relevant skills, academic awards or honors, research experience, teaching experience, academic publications, presentations and lectures, grants and scholarships, fellowships, assistantships, graduate fieldwork, training, and certifications. That is a lot. And there's some things there that a lot of people don't have any work experience in, like maybe publications. So that's why CVs are usually used in academic spaces. However, there are times when I have submitted my CV for jobs. It just depends really on what they ask and what you think is appropriate. The main thing I want you to take away is that a resume adapts to the job you're applying for, and a CV is a comprehensive document of everything you've ever done. That is why oftentimes I encourage students to write a CV. Even if they might not use it, still write it, because it can be really beneficial to be able to pull from their CV in writing their resumes. That is all I have for today in regards to resumes, although I am thinking about making a part 2 to this in the future just because there is so much to cover. And so if you have any questions about resumes, reach out in my Instagram DMs at showbizbabypod, biz with a Z. Or you can reach out to my personal Instagram, Hannah Ranco. You can also email me at showbizbabypod@gmail.com. Have a great rest of your week and keep dancing.